Workforce Connection Center Manager in Lombard. We are a free service to the community. You can call us, text us, come into our center. We are helping people virtually and in person. We help with resume writing, job search. If you need to get ready for an interview, we help with mock interviews. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to assist you in any help that you need in your job search. Today, we're talking about customer service. This is usually a 3-day workshop, but we're going to combine all of the different topics in the next couple of hours or hour and a half. So we're going to talk about customer service, professionalism, communication, emotional intelligence, building relationships. But I guess, you know, you're probably wondering, like, what does this have to do with the job search? And I think that, you know, a lot of employers now are looking for these power skills, which used to be like soft skills, which is really transferable skills. It's interpersonal skills, communication, leadership, organizational skills. And these are really all of the skills that you use with working with customers. And so as we're going through this presentation, I want you to kind of think about your interactions with customers, your interactions with your supervisor, with people on your team, and think about what skills you're using. And these are really the skills that you're going to add to your resume. So right now, we're going to start out. I want to show you a video that I think is kind of funny, and it really is all of the bad skills, customer service skills that we see. So let me just share this with you for a second. If I can find it. Second. And I'm having a hard time finding that. Just one moment, please. Go.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're only 40 rows 9 and above right now. You'll have to wait.
I'm in row 8.
Please step aside, sir.
It's just one row. I just think it's okay.
We'll call you row momentarily. Order the crescent rolls and beauty the cranberries. No, I can't cook.
Can I put you on hold real quick while I check the knowledge base? All right, thanks.
Step aside, sir.
I think you forgot my bread. Bread, $2 extra.
No. In front of me got free bread.
You want bread?
Yes, please.
$3. Good for you.
Okay. See that one over there? That is a phone.
Yeah. Well, I'll see you tomorrow then. Gobble, gobble. Oh, bye-bye. Thank you for waiting. We'd like to continue boarding the aircraft now. We're now boarding all rows, please. All remaining rows. Enjoy your flight.
Hi everyone, Mark Martin here at Sandy Hook Promise.
I think we've all
December 14th, 2012.
we've all seen or been witness to or been treated pretty poorly, I think, companies that we go to or services provided to us. So we know good customer service when we have it, and we know bad customer service when we have it, right? So think of a really bad customer service experience that you had, and how many people did you tell about the bad service? Did you go back? And then think about good customer service. What did that look like? Did that person go beyond and above what they were supposed to do? Did they spend a little bit more time with you? Did they de-escalate a situation? Were you all upset when you approached them and they were able to calm you down? And then how many people did you tell about that experience? And this is what employers are looking at, right? Companies, they really carefully watch when customers come back, because if a customer has good experience, they're probably going to tell 9 people about that good experience. If they have bad experience, they're going to tell 16 people about that experience, right? They're probably going to go to Yelp. They're going to, go on social media and spread it all over the place. And companies have a hard time, rebuttaling those bad reviews. It's hard for them to, go out there and, really show their brand in a good light. And they really pay attention to all of that, those comments about them. And that's their brand, right? So when a customer measures their experience, we measure it how we're treated, if we're going to come back, was it an easy process, was it a complicated process? Employers measure it differently. They want to know, how much do you promote us? Do you go out there on Yelp and write good reviews? Do you tell your friends? And, employers, they will give you money for promoting them, right? And they want to know, how much do you spend? And they want to know, what was the cost to serve you? Those are all of the costs of paying their employees and promotionals and shipping fees if it's done virtually. They pay attention to all this. They measure it differently than the experience of the customer. And there's a review out there by the Harvard Business Review that if a customer has a good experience, they're going to spend 140% more compared to, if they had poor experience. So, why are we talking about all of this? We're talking about it because it's brand loyalty, right? Just think of all of the different companies out there that you're loyal to. Do you like Coke over Pepsi? Do you like Dunkin' Donuts versus Starbucks? Do you, usually shop Amazon, or do you like to go into the store? All of this is being watched. And so companies are trying to kind of get you addicted to them in a way. But if they want you to have a good, positive experience, a good feeling with their brand, and they spend a lot of money to do that. Because remember, companies exist to make money, right? That's the mission. So if they're not making money, they can't exist, and we don't have a job. So there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that a customer has a good experience, because we want them to come back. That's where the company makes the money, with the repeat business. So if a customer is having a bad experience because the employee is giving bad service, then the customer isn't going to come back. And so there's a lot of money spent on training employees to give good customer service. And they look for the right person when they're hiring to, represent the brand. Our jobs no longer are 9 to 5. We're always on. And just think of all of the, garbage that's gone on social media where where employees are kind of revealing their true values, what's important to them, their biases. And then, the media or somebody finds out, or the company finds out that this person is, out there, showing their biases. All of those people that have lost their jobs. And even though it wasn't on company time, that person brings that value, into the company. And, companies have value statements, what's important to them. So, if they have a brand that says we value our customers, they're probably going to ask a lot of questions about in the interview, with this candidate, how do you value customers? So if they kind of figure out somehow that, this person, this candidate isn't going to represent them well, or doesn't understand the importance of giving customer service or care or have good interpersonal skills, which we're going to talk about later, why are they going to hire them? Why are they going to hire this person that's not going to represent them well to the public or to the customer? So there's a lot of planning, training, finding the right employee to represent this company in the face of the public. So, Jeff Bezos, right? Amazon is taking over the world, and their approach to customers is we see our customers as invited guests to a party, and we are the host. It's our job every day to make sure every important aspect of the customer service is a bit better. It's, having those hospitality skills, wanting to maybe serve somebody, is really what, makes an employee provide good customer service. So let's get into, what are these skills? So let's do this little quiz here, and at home you could, kind of decide if it's true or false to you. In responding to a frustrated customer's question, it's a good idea to immediately offer a solution. Is that true or false? When dealing with an angry customer face-to-face, making no eye contact and looking away will feel better for you and the customer. Is that true or false? When dealing with an abusive customer on the phone, it's important to hang up right away. Is that true or false? If the customer gets the wrong idea from a company rep, it's okay to tell the customer that the rep will tell you what you want to hear. Is that true or false? So as you can see, they're all false, right? In responding to a frustrated customer's question, it's a good idea to immediately offer a solution. False. That skill in that interaction with that customer is a listening skill. And so if you're going to offer a solution right away, you may not have actually heard what the customer's frustration is all about. Maybe they're frustrated because they don't agree with a company policy of returning something in 30 days. But you're just going to offer it to them anyways, regardless of what the policy is, when there might be another solution. When dealing with an angry customer face-to-face, making no eye contact and looking away will be better for you and the customer. Of course, that's false. And that is a body language skill, right? You have to make eye contact with the person you're talking to because it shows that you're interested, right? And yes, it might be hard for people to make eye contact, and maybe that interaction is a little tense because the customer is upset, and it's hard for you to make contact or eye contact with that person. But your body language is seen and heard before you actually speak something. When dealing with an abusive customer on the phone, it's important to hang up right away. Well, of course, that's false. That requires emotional intelligence when you're dealing with customers, especially a customer that's being abusive or yelling at you. Is that going to trigger you to yell? And this means using your emotional intelligence skills, and we're going to talk about that. And it's being aware of how you're interacting with that customer. If the customer gets the wrong idea from a company rep, it's okay to tell the customer that the rep will tell you what you want to hear. Of course, that's false. It's taking responsibility, even if it's not a situation you caused or you were the issue, but you represent the company. So you have to take responsibility for everybody's action, good or bad. So these are, some of the skills that you're using when you're interacting with a customer that you don't realize that you're using. Customer service is really about a person's ability to use a variety of skills and knowing what skills are needed in the moment. Again, we want the customer to come back, and there's many skills that we're going to pull from our toolbox of skills, if you will. Some skills might require, greater listening or greater communication than other skills. But here are some of the top 10 skills for customer service jobs: clear communication, listening, self-control, a positive attitude, assertiveness, conflict resolution, empathy, depersonalization, taking responsibility, a sense of humor. Here are some of the top skills that are needed. So when you are applying for a job, go back and look at all of your interactions with customers, your interactions with your team members, or interactions with maybe people from other departments, and think about listening. When were you listening? Was it in a meeting? Was it a customer? Were you maybe in a call center, which requires a lot of listening skills, right? Self-control, positive attitude, conflict resolution. Think of all the times you had to de-escalate a situation. How did you do that? What was the outcome? Having a sense of humor, right? Yes, you want to take things serious, but you don't want to be so tense that people are uncomfortable being around you. Other customer service skills: attention, choice of words, facial expressions, politeness, body language. These are all skills that we're using with our interactions with customers. And as you can see, some of the elements of personal communication, 55% is body language. Are you folding your arms? If you're folding your arms against yourself, that means you're closing yourself off. You making eye contact? Are you crossing your legs? Are your hands sweaty? So really pay attention to how your body is responding to that interaction, and be careful not to kind of close yourself off to that conversation. We're going to talk about communication skills, the listening skills, and self-control going forward in this presentation. So communication. So clearly communication is, you have a sender, they're sending a message, the receiver is receiving and providing feedback. And then, there's this cycle. Person's asking a question, someone's listening, and then back and forth. Here are some of the skills that you use when you are communicating with somebody. You have to have clarity of the message. You're checking your understanding. You're taking your turn, which is hard for people because some people like to talk over somebody, or they think they know what the receiver is saying when actually they've got it wrong. Active listening, choosing the right method, self-awareness, and appropriate body language. Here are the skills you're using when you're interacting with somebody. So the clarity of message, is you need to understand your audience. You have to tailor your message to that person. You know, if you're maybe talking to somebody that you might think that they have a language barrier, or maybe the person has a disability, or you know, you're talking maybe to a person of advanced age. You know, there's those diversity issues sometimes. So you've really got to understand, who is this person that I'm talking to? And not that one demographic deserves more respect than another. But, you know, understanding your audience is a big part of, you know, relaying messages and communicating. Avoid jargon, use words that are known, not business industry words. Everybody understands, you know, acronyms. So make sure that you're not using jargon. Keep it short and simple, get the highlights, the key points, ask for feedback. It's really important to make sure that you understand. So you could say, I'm hearing you say this. You know, so kind of repeat back what you are hearing the concern is, or what the message is that they want you to hear. Over communicate, it takes repetition to remember and internalize what you've heard or learned. So don't overshare or over communicate. Choose the right medium for the message. So the choices are many, and the message could determine which medium that you're going to select. You know, maybe you might have to call them back, or maybe you're on the phone with them. Maybe it's through, you know, texting or email. So anyways, these are some of the different components of clarity of message. And so it's making sure that it's easy to understand, that you're conveying a message that is easy to understand. The elimination of ambiguity when communicating or hinging on clarity is persuasiveness. People need to understand before they're convinced. So you might need to get buy-in. So define technical terms. Never assume they read it. You know, again, ask questions. Say, this is what I'm hearing you say. Put the most important information first. You know, that's where kind of that jargon and all that comes in. Just kind of get to the point. Write in chronological order. And if you want to learn more about it, here's a good book that can help you kind of understand clarity of message. And that's by called Everybody Writes. So communication, the listening skills, this is a big part of your interactions with customers. And so the customer service involves both truly and deeply listening to what your customers experiencing and the ability to maintain a positive demeanor. So maintain the eye contact and face the speaker when you're talking to them. You know, don't turn your back on them. You know, don't put your head down, but make eye contact when you're talking to them. Don't be judgmental while you're listening. Sometimes our biases come into that. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Don't interrupt the speaker until they have, you know, given their point or gotten their point across. And employ active listening skills. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And think about what the other person is saying and not how you're going to respond. So really being focused on their message and not in your mind thinking about, you know, this is what I'm going to say to them, because you're really not listening if you're trying to, you know, craft a rebuttal. So there's different stages to listening. There's receiving, understanding, remembering, evaluating, feedback, and this happens in seconds. So we're not talking about, you know, the stages happening in 5 or 10 minutes. It's happening in seconds, and you don't even realize what's happening while you're listening to somebody. There's the receiving. You're actually at the stage. You're only hearing the message. There are many reasons that we may not receive a message. There's different barriers because maybe we're just not paying attention or multitasking. or we're being selective about what we want to hear, or defensive, because maybe this person's starting the conversation yelling at you. So automatically you're defensive, or feeling ambushed. So this is the receiving part of it. And then you go into the understanding part. So now maybe, now you're listening to what they have to say. You got past the yelling, you got past maybe you got past some of the noise in the background. We're attempting to learn the message of what they're saying. And it's not easy because maybe the speaker might not enunciate clearly. And it may be difficult to understand the message because you really just don't understand what they're saying. And then there still might be noise back in the background. And we might also make the mistake of attaching our own meaning to it. So we're still not understanding what they're saying. We're still trying to comprehend it. And maybe we get into the remembering part. Now we know what they're saying. We remember, oh, they're here for that, or we kind of comprehend and absorb it better. If you can't remember something that was said, you might not have been listening. Highly complex messages that are filled with detail call for highly developed listening skills. So maybe there are a lot of details, a lot of time, that they're talking about different days. And then we get into we're actually evaluating it now. And in this process too, there even might be biases. Maybe we have a bias against a gender or ethnicity, and that calls into play within our listening skills. So now we're evaluating and judging the value of the message. We might be thinking this makes sense, this is odd, we're putting it together, and again, the biases might come into play. And then we get to the feedback. This is where we're actually responding. There's a lot happening in seconds. We're receiving, we're understanding, we're trying to remember what they said, we're evaluating what they said, and then we get to the feedback now. And this is the fifth and final stage of the listening process before we, get ready to actually respond. So we're collecting the information, and then we're responding. This is happening in seconds. And there's many, distractions too in play here. Maybe another customer walks in, maybe the phone's ringing. So we're kind of multitasking all of these different stages before we get to the feedback. Does anybody have any questions about anything in this process, anything I've said? I do see a chat question here. Oh, that's my email. So anyways, as you could see, a big part of our interactions with each other, with our customers, is really the listening skills, right? So here's some easy ways to be more an active listener. Smile. Even if you're on the phone, smile. Occasionally paraphrase what you've heard. I hear this, I hear that. Ask relevant questions. Take notes if you have to. And be present and give the speaker your full attention. So don't be distracted, like be in that moment, be like a Buddha. Like there's nothing else happening in the world than what's happening in front of you and what this person is saying, and be in that moment. And that's really hard sometimes. It's hard for people. We get distracted, and it comes with training your mind to be present. So again, as we're talking about all of this, you need to be reflecting on all of your interactions with your customers, because I can guarantee you in any of the job descriptions that you're going to read, it's probably going to ask for somebody that's a good communicator, which, when we see that in the job description, we're thinking, well, what does that mean? It means so many things. It means listening. It means writing. It actually means having good interpersonal skills. So think about all of this as you are writing your resume and reflecting on all of your interactions with everybody that you have communicated with in your profession. If it's customers, again, colleagues, supervisors, vendors, whoever that may be. Attentiveness. So listening actively and paying close attention to what is being said or done. That's attentiveness. You have to be alert, watchful, receptive. So immerse yourself in silence. I just told you, it's like being a Buddha, be in that moment. Enjoy the mundane. Do one thing at a time. Adjust your listening position. So here's an exercise. These are all exercises for you to do to be a more attentive person, to kind of craft or build your listening skills. Let's talk about self-awareness and self-control. So, we talked about the communication skills. We're going to get into the self-awareness part. I want to do a little quiz here with you. So I'm going to go through and read this. And at home, I want you to just kind of think how you would respond or kind of gauge your self-awareness skills as I kind of go through this. And give me a moment, I need some water. So can you name the behaviors that you are doing at all times? Yes, I'm always attentive with my behaviors and can name what I'm talking with, and can name what I'm taking part in at all times. Or B, sometimes I'm usually aware of what I'm doing, although at times I get caught up in something or don't realize what I'm doing. Or C, no, I rarely am aware of what my body or my mind is doing. And these are behaviors. Think about your behaviors. It might seem obvious, but it can be challenging to recognize your own behaviors. Every day, we have to make about 2,000 decisions. Because this number is so high, our brain usually takes over and acts without us even being conscious of it. All of these unconscious decisions decrease our self-awareness. We kind of become conditioned. We aren't, we just kind of do it without thinking about what we're actually doing. Again, it's being in that moment, being present. Are you aware of your behaviors? Can you identify what causes a shift to a negative emotion? Yes, I can always identify what causes me to shift to negative emotions, whether it's an event, a person, or a reoccurring trigger. Sometimes I could usually identify what causes a shift in emotions, although it takes a little while for me to catch on. Or C, no, I rarely know what specifically causes me to shift to negative emotions. All of a sudden, I'm no longer happy and I don't know why. Again, can you name your emotions? Emotional intelligence is perhaps the foundation of all self-awareness, and it's not easy. Humans are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. These driving emotions get in the way of our rational thinking. The more self-aware you are of your emotions, the better you can control them. Do you know what shifts to a negative emotion? 3, can you name the emotional patterns you experience the most? So A, yes, I can emotion patterns right now, including what they are, what causes them, and what effect they have on my life. B, somewhat, I generally know what I have a tendency to do, but it's not always consistent or recognizable. Or C, no, I have no idea what emotional patterns I repeat. I have emotions, but I can't name any trends or when or why they happen. So I know it's difficult to believe, but we don't just switch to a negative emotion for no apparent reason. There's always something that causes the shift. The problem is that we don't always know what this something is. So be aware of that shift. And we're going to kind of talk about that in more detail in a moment. Can you name your deepest fear triggers? Yes, I'm self-aware of my deepest fears and what triggers these fears in my everyday life. I understand how persuasive these fears are in my thoughts and actions. B, somewhat, I can tell you what I'm most scared of, but I don't fully know how it affects my life or daily actions. Or C, no, I have no idea what a fear trigger even is or if I have one. So if emotions are difficult to identify for you, emotional patterns can be even trickier. We all fall into emotional patterns, both negative and positive, that repeat themselves in our lives. Once you're self-aware of these patterns, you can begin to improve your negative patterns and construct your positive ones. So this is really all about self-awareness and self-control. So why do you think it's relative to customer service? And so since our audience is probably muted, I'm going to fill that in for you. So it's important because, when we're working with customers, the way they approach us, the things that they say, maybe even their perfume might trigger us if we don't have self-control, especially if it's in a situation where there's some tension, the customer's yelling. The worst thing that you could do is to yell back, right? You have to be in control of the situation. And if you can't control your reaction to this person, then you've lost. We've lost the customer and we can't really help the customer. And we take it personally. These interactions shouldn't be taken personally because most of the time we don't know this person. We're just providing a service to them. So it's on us to control the situation and to control ourselves. And so that means this is the emotional intelligence part of it. And it was coined by Dan Goleman in 1996. He has a book about it. There's a whole movement about measuring your intelligence. It's kind of like measuring your IQ. It's measuring, am I self-aware and can I manage myself? So emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, manage your own emotions, and recognize and understand the emotions of others. So there's two parts. It's your understanding and managing yourself, and your understanding and managing the other person. And you're not a psychiatrist or psychologist or a counselor. It's not about psychoanalyzing, or analyzing them, but it's, relating to them, having empathy. And we're going to talk more about that in a moment. So this is kind of the chart of emotional intelligence. So you always start with the recognition, and this is your personal competency. It's your self-awareness. It's your self-confidence, right? You have to have good self-esteem. And part of this self-confidence is recognizing and being aware of your emotions. It's recognizing how your behavior impacts other people and paying attention to how others influence your emotional state. So it's being self-aware, it's being confident, in yourself, having self-esteem, and really recognizing your emotions, recognizing what triggers you, recognizing, if it's, like I said before, even smells trigger somebody and you own it. That when somebody says this to me, I, fly off the handle. Well, then, okay, great. But how are you going to manage that? And that's where it gets into the self-management of it. You know it, you understand it, and you can manage that emotion, and you aren't triggered by when somebody, says this particular thing that always sets you off. So it's keeping disruptive emotions and impulses in check. So you go from I understand it, I know what my triggers are, and I can regulate it. I can manage myself. I'm, acting in congruence with your values. So what does that mean? We all have values, something that's important to us. It's kind of like our roadmap in life. It's how we make decisions, right? So if your values are honesty, integrity, being kind to people, believing in people, having empathy for people, you're not going to fly off the handle and yell at people because it's important to how you're handling, change and flexibility. Change is a big part of emotional intelligence, and it's so important in this day and age, right? Because everything is changing so fast, especially in our employment situations, right? Companies now are having to make decisions and change all the time, right? There's new technology, they're using new databases, we're upskilling, we're reskilling, and they can't hire somebody that cannot handle change. Just think of all the people that we worked with, or even ourselves. Like, how do we respond to change? Automatically, there's that fear. Am I going to be relevant anymore? Am I going to lose my job? So how do you handle that? Can you regulate those emotions of fear and not be triggered by it? And this is what companies are needed. They need people to be able to handle change and not have to be the Debbie Downers and pull everybody down and say, oh, another change and blah, blah, blah. You got to get on board. In every job, it's just like that. And if you could, in the interview, if you can somehow relate to your potential employer or to this hiring manager that you handle a change, it's such a valuable skill. But anyways, regulation, you're pursuing goals and opportunities despite the obstacles and setbacks. So there's gonna be setbacks all the time. Can you regulate this? Are you always, going to be depressed by it or triggered or upset or yelling and handling your emotions? When we, have these disappointments in life, does it set you back all the time? Are you able to get over the obstacles? So again, you have your self-awareness, you're managing your emotions. Once you've been able to handle all of this, then you're able to relate to people. If you can't get past the self-management, how are you going to manage a situation where somebody's yelling at you? Because you are the owner of that conversation in a customer service situation. So then you're able to be socially aware. You are, picking up the mood in the room. You're picking up on the body language of the person that you're talking to, and you're caring what others are going through, and you're hearing what the other person is really saying. Again, this hearing, we just talked about the listening skills, right? There's all those barriers to really get to that point where you understand what this person in front of you was saying, in anywhere in that, few seconds that you're talking to this person, have you been triggered? And if you're triggered, you're not listening to what the customer's saying. So are you socially aware of what's happening in front of you? Can you understand, can you read the room? And once you're socially aware, then you can manage the situation, right? You're getting along with others, you're handling conflict effectively, you're clearly expressing ideas and information and using sensitivity to the other person's feeling. That's the empathy. You're able to manage the interactions successfully. So there's a lot happening, but the core of emotional intelligence is the self-awareness. So it's a scientific fact that emotions precede our thoughts. So we have an emotion before we even have the thoughts. When emotions run high, they change the way our brains function. So we lose these cognitive abilities to make decisions and to even, have interpersonal skills or react to somebody appropriately. We're understanding and managing our emotions and the emotions of others helps us to be more successful in our personal, professional lives and supporting our customers, right? So, when you have a customer that, even if there's no yelling, but maybe they say something that just triggers you, or maybe you're talking to somebody that calls you babe or honey, or, maybe it's a person of an older generation. I know a lot of men, of a particular, generation that like to say honey, and that triggers some people. They think it's demeaning and talking down to them. So even though the customer isn't yelling, but this one person says it, automatically you're defensive. And now you have a tone and an attitude, and the other person that called you honey isn't picking up on it. And so, you're escalating the situation because you've been triggered by this one word. So an emotional trigger is anything, including emotions, experience, events that sparks an intense emotional reaction regarding regardless of your current mood. So you just the snap of a finger, your emotions have changed because you've been triggered. And so there's different, and I'm not a psychologist, we're not going to really get into this too much, but just briefly, we suffer from emotional triggers because it's usually in our past, right? So there's three main reasons somebody's triggered. It's opposing values and beliefs. And just think of our political climate right now. We are so identified with our values and our beliefs that if somebody is talking down to us, or somebody has a different value than us, we're automatically offended because we think they're talking down to us, or that our beliefs and values aren't valid, which isn't the truth. Somebody have a different value or belief about something, and it doesn't mean this other person, is less than a person because they believe differently. But we're so, tied to our beliefs and values, and our identity, we might find it hard to tolerate opposing beliefs. So when another person disagrees or challenges the values, we're triggered automatically, right? There's trauma. Getting triggered is a term that goes back to the experience of post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's often experienced. It was coined because of soldiers coming back from war. So we can get triggered when we see, hear, taste, touch, or smell something that reminds us of a previous traumatic circumstance or situation. So there's that trauma in the past that triggers us. And then there's the ego. The ego is the sense of self. It's the I. It's this our artificial identity we carry, what that is composed of our thoughts, our memories, our cultural values, our assumptions, our beliefs. Our whole life is structured on all of this, and how we fit into society. Our egos are challenged or hurt by others. We're prone to being triggered because, again, you're challenging me, my sense of value, or my sense of, importance in the world. And so, these are some of our triggers. So this might happen in our conversations with people, and, it causes us to be triggered and we lose this self-control. There's also like that inner voice that we have too. And one thing we can do to develop a strong inner voice is to be aware of it. When you're having that trigger moment, when somebody said honey to you, automatically you get this self-talk of who does this person think they are, but it's your reaction to it. You might have that voice, but it's how you manifest it on the outside is, really what's important with that interaction with the customer. So if you could manage that inner voice, you'll have empathy, you'll be a better communicator. But of course, if you have that negative self-talk about it, you're going to yell and have a tone and scream at the customer. So it's paying attention. Remember, I said that our emotions come before the thoughts, and paying attention to what's happening with your body, not only the self-talk, but is your blood pressure going up? Are your hands being sweaty? Are your hands being crossed and you're holding them close to your person? These are all of the reactions, these emotions before the thought even comes in, because we have an emotion and then we're like, oh, that's right, this person called me honey, this is why I'm reacting that way. But if you have a good self inner voice, that voice that says, oh, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm stupid, not reacting to it. So how do you do that? How do you regulate it? So, you don't want to buy into it, but you don't want to suppress it either. So here are some of the, the steps that you could take is first recognizing these patterns. Remember when we did that quiz, I asked you, do you know these emotional patterns? Do you have them? Are you self-aware? Well, you've got to recognize it first. So the first step is developing emotional agility to notice when you've been hooked on your thoughts and your feelings. You have to realize that you're stuck before you can initiate the change. So you have to recognize it. Am I always reacting this way when somebody says something? That's the recognition, right? Labeling it. So now okay, I recognize this. Now I'm going to label it. Label that thought or the emotion. So when you're hooked, the attention you give to your thoughts and feelings, it crowds your mind. There's no room to examine them. So one strategy that may help you is to consider the situation more objectively, is the simple act of labeling it. So my coworker is wrong, he makes me angry. Well, now you're saying, I'm having that thought, my coworker is wrong, and I'm feeling angry. So now you labeled it. And then accept it. The opposite of control is acceptance, not acting on every thought or resigning yourself to negativity, but responding to your ideas and emotions with an open attitude, paying attention to them and letting yourself experience it, but not reacting. You're accepting it, but you're not reacting to it. So in that situation where you feel like, he's going to call me honey again, or call me honey again, take some deep breaths and notice what's happening. Notice that, my blood pressure is going, my hands are sweating because this person's calling me honey again. And this may bring relief, but it won't necessarily make you feel good. In fact, you may realize just how upset you are. The important thing is to show yourself some compassion and examine the reality of the situation and what's going on. So that's where the work comes in. Okay, you accept it, but maybe you do need to talk to somebody or read a book or meditate and work on this. And then act on your values. When you unhook yourself from your difficult thoughts and emotions, you expand your choices. You can decide to act in a way that aligns with your values. We encourage leaders to focus on the concept of workability. Is your response going to serve you and your organization in the long term, as well in the short term? And that's what you got to think. Is the way that I'm acting, is this going to serve me well? Is it going to serve me well to correct this person when they call me honey? Do I need to actually say to this person, stop calling me honey, or please do not, or just, forget it. It's harmless. Yeah, it triggers you, but this is this person's way of, like a term of endearment. Why do you need to react to it? Let this person just say it, whatever. They're not being abusive. It's not physical abuse. That's a whole conversation, but you're acting on your values, and maybe your value is to respect somebody. Well, I'm respecting this person by, not embarrassing them, and they're going to buy their item, and, maybe they'll come back or not. We want them to come back, and that's why we're not going to respond to it and embarrass them, because really it's harmless. So how to maintain composure: breathe while the other person is speaking, or before responding in writing, take a breath. be slow and deliberate about it, measure it, to calm you're calming your body, your blood pressure. And then watch out for the halt. And that stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Given that's impossible to separate external stress from the customer in front of us, stay vigilant over these physical and emotional stages. Maybe you haven't eaten, maybe you're diabetic and you've gone, a couple hours without eating. Maybe you're having some self-worth issues, or you're lonely or tired. Having good sleep is important. Are you responding because you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Delay the conversation or your response. Lost composure happens. That's fine as long as you're willing to step away. Is there somebody that could jump in for you? Do you need to reschedule a conversation? Never feel like calling a timeout as a sign of weakness. If you can, maybe, you could end the conversation by saying, oh, I've got a meeting to go to, or can we talk about this another time? If a customer is in front of you and triggering you and you haven't responded, maybe you could get somebody to step in really quickly, run to the bathroom to kind of take a breath. And here's a good book, Asshole Survival Guide. Sometimes customers are just horrible, but it's on you. You own that conversation or that relationship with the customer. Of course, if they're being abusive, that's a whole other conversation. But we want customers to come back, right? So to recap, that's the end of this presentation. We talked about companies build brand loyalty. We need repeat business. So the whole concept here, the whole thought is that, customer is a jerk, but we do want them to come back, right? We need repeat business. That's how companies make money. Customer service is really about a person's ability to use a variety of skills, knowing what skills to use in the moment, right? We talked about listening skills. We talked about communication skills. We talked about self-awareness. Sometimes we're using some of these and not others. There are 5 stages to listening. We're receiving, understanding, remembering, evaluating, and the feedback. Looks like somebody might have a question. At the core of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. So we have to be self-aware of ourself. That's the self-confidence, the self-esteem. Once, we're able to build our confidence and aware of our triggers, then we can manage it. We're managing our emotions, our inner voice, and then we can master the social awareness. We read the audience, we understand this person, we have empathy for them, and then we could, manage the relationship. We could de-escalate a situation because we read the room, we understand this person, we're not taking it personally. Emotional intelligence is about knowing yourself, knowing how you tend to react to situations, and then being able to understand the other person's feelings. And then building relationships is about communicating, knowing your customer, and the honesty. So that's basically everything that we talked about. Does anybody have any questions or comments?